Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon now, I should say. We have just gone into the afternoon here at the Samee office, and we are with another Samee Whiz session, which is really exciting. These are becoming a regular occurrence now, which is great. And we have prime time lunchtime on a Friday, which means it's a fantastic opportunity to be able to talk to people. I know some people are starting to come in and log in as we speak, so we'll just wait for them to start getting on board, and here they come. The numbers are starting to flash up. So it's good to see people starting to come in and starting to join us. And we are leading up to the end of the year, but we're going to keep going strong right up until the end, which is fantastic. So if you've just joined us, pop on and say hello. Let us know that you're in on the comments. Just to let you know, the same as usual, we have Samee, if you can't get any of the questions onto the comments for whatever reasons, you also have my email address, which is ricky@samee as well. So you can send questions through to there, but please do add a question in the comments section. Anything you've got to have on today's guests or anything else. And just to let you know, we will release details next week, but we are also going to have a little bit of a competition because we want to grow the audience on these. So we're looking to grow and develop these. They're becoming successful. So there will be something that you can win for sharing and encouraging people to join us and encouraging the audience to grow. And I know you're going to be excited by it, but I'm not going to reveal it till next week. So we're going to save that one for the excitement. So coming in and join us, Lorraine is already with us. We've got Emily is with us and saying hello. So hello to both of those. I know we've got the Samee team are on board as well in the background. I've got the Fry Yeah t-shirt on, so we're ready to go. So do say hello, do add your questions and comments, but without further ado, thank you ever so much for joining us, Chloe. It is a pleasure to have you on board. And would you like to share a little bit of your background and story with everyone?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Chloe. I'm a little nervous. I've not done anything like this before. So, yeah, I'm almost 30. I'm a disabled access consultant in the south of England, in lovely Dorset. I say lovely, actually, the weather's looking pretty good here, so it's quite lovely. I've been an access consultant for about 3 years. This year I finally went fully self-employed, so took the big leap this year. What a year to take the big leap. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful, thank you. And it is, you're right, it's brave enough at any stage to go, do you know what, I'm going to be self-employed and I'm going to take that leap. But to have done it fully in this year, with all the challenges, hats off to you. It's, it is a big leap, but I'm sure it's going to continue in the right direction. We've also got the Samee team are on there saying good afternoon. We've got Michael's also joined us. Hello, gang. So there's a few more on, so do feel free to share. And brilliant. So we are going to crack on with things and just have a little bit of a chat about what you do and bring a bit more detail to that. And like I've said, if anyone does have any questions around what we're discussing or around the experience with self-employment, then feel free to add them in the comments. And also do let us know what value you're getting from them as we go through. So let's get started, shall we, Chloe?
Yes.
Let's just have a look. So I think the first thing I wanted to know, because it's an interesting access consultant, disability access consultant is an interesting title. And I wanted to kind of just ask the question, really, how did you discover the role of access consultant and what made you decide that this role was for you?
Well, as I think a lot of disabled people find, they get into situations that are not accessible and find someone to talk to. And that was basically how I stumbled into it. I went to an event at the British Museum, and I should probably not have said that, but yeah, at the British Museum, they're great, and I love the British Museum. And it was just so inaccessible, and it hadn't been thought about, and I just thought this is quite frustrating. It happens quite a lot to disabled people. I find that getting into inaccessible situations and thinking, this could have gone so much better. Why did this happen? and I ended up getting the email address of the access manager at the British Museum at the time. And I had a really nice sit-down chat with her and told her all about, the problems that I had at that particular event. And we just clicked quite instantly. And I had no idea that, of course, there are access managers. They exist. And so I also have parents who are involved in the museum sector in Dorset. And so I sort of thought, well, I love museums. I love history. I really get on really well with this lady. So why don't I just ask her if I can shadow her for 2 weeks? So I shadowed her for 2 weeks, learning all about her role. And then I just thought, I deal with access issues all the time. Why not get paid to improve things? So that's kind of how I came into it. Yeah, and like I said, I've been doing it for about 3 years, so I've been doing it on and off. I did the shadowing, and I did some additional work with the British Museum, and that was a real coup. I had a really nice time doing that. And yeah, just officially this year, I thought that's what I want to do. It's what I enjoy, and hey, getting disabled people into those roles and getting actual disabled people into access consulting roles is really important, because we're not traditionally in those roles. So ironically,
yeah, and I think that's absolutely, I think you've hit the nail on the head, is getting people into those roles, because if you're having that experience and you're having to deal with those challenges, then who better to advise on it than someone that has to face those challenges? So
they have the lived experience. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Sharon is saying hi. Sharon's joined us as well. Hi, Sharon. And Michael's actually saying so many places say they're wheelchair accessible, and they're not, let alone any other access issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Lorraine is saying, good for you. Asking to shadow the person at the British Museum, it can be nerve-wracking putting yourself out there. So
absolutely.
that's absolutely brilliant. And I think that's the other good thing about it. You wanted to know a little bit more about this, so you actually went to shadow someone and find out about it, rather than just going, oh, this is a good idea, I can get started. You gained that experience first to understand what the role involved. So
but it was also quite a learning experience, I think, for her, because at the time, this is maybe about 4 years ago now. At the time, it's hard for someone who isn't disabled to say, this isn't accessible, you need to change this. And putting me in the room, I think, really made a huge difference, because you've got designers, you've got people who are looking at the exhibition space and they're going, well, we want this and we want it to look like this. And to have an actual disabled person sitting there saying, that's not going to work, it's just completely inaccessible, really makes a huge difference and adds a lot more credence, I think, to what they're saying.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
as well for me.
Absolutely. And Martin's joined us as well, and we were talking about Martin just before, so I think Chloe's going to be in touch with you, Martin, just to talk about what you're doing in a bit more detail, but we'll discuss that afterwards. But also, I think, tell us a little bit about what does an act, because I think it is pretty self-explanatory in the title, but I think it's always good to go a bit more in depth. So what does an access consultant do, and what benefits does this provide for a business?
Well, the access consultant can do a range of different things, depending, I think, on their experience and their where they tend to focus. For me, my main focus is going into arts and culture organizations, so that's museums and art galleries, but I also consult with private businesses as well. And coming on board and providing things like an access statement, because a lot of websites, a lot of businesses don't even have the basic access statement, which gives disabled people who are visiting the guide, what's going to happen when they get there, what are the access provisions, and they have to have an access statement. So I can write those. I can also do access audits, which basically means that you go around the organization, you go around the space, and you say, this is not accessible, this is what you could do to change it. And the benefits for the organization, as I repeatedly say to them, is there are 13.9 million disabled people in this country, and we have a spending power of £232 billion. So
Wow.
it financially behoves them to be accessible. I
Yeah.
think the people forget the purple pound is estimated at 232 billion. And I think when it comes to access, businesses kind of think, well, it's so expensive, and why should I do this? It's such a minority of people, like, you know,
Mm.
despite their legal obligations.
Yeah.
Um, and saying to them, look, we have a spending power of £232 billion. Like, if you want access to that money, it financially benefits you
Yeah.
to be inclusive and to make changes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
actually, I think that's a very good point. You put you know, when you hear the numbers, because all the time we'll hear percentages of figures and things like that, and and people look at, well, that's, you know, that's only 20%, or that's only 30%, or whatever the figure is, and that's quite a small percentage. It's less than half. But actually, when you look at the numbers and look at it as 13.9 million people,
Yeah.
that's a huge number of people. And we know that, you know,
Yeah.
actually not just the spending power of it, you know, that's a huge figure spending wise, but also you look at actually what that does for a business, because more often than not, you might find that actually people with disabilities might want to go out at different times, or they might be out, you know, they might not necessarily just be during the peak time. So actually that could
Yeah.
improve your income during the week, as well as, and during your
Exactly.
quiet time, as well as during
And
your busy
also,
times.
disabled people don't live, like, generally speaking, disabled people don't exist in their own solitary world. We have
Yeah.
friends, we have family, we have partners. That includes them as well. So, and that's the nice thing about having the purple pound, is it takes into consideration the family of the disabled person, the friends of the disabled person. So it's not just us. We don't exist
Yeah.
in a vacuum. We have friends,
Yeah.
and so it means that you engage with a lot more people than just that particular
Yeah.
person, more amount of
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And
So,
I think access as well, when we talk about access, and I know this is something we've maybe not covered in the questions, but just thinking about access as well, we're not just necessarily talking about the physical access to things. And I noticed recently Tesco's did an experiment where they took one day a week and a certain time period where they actually made the stores quieter and lowered the lighting to make it more accessible for people like with conditions like autism, to make it more friendly for those type of conditions as well. So, you know, it can mean a whole host of things. But
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
absolutely brilliant. So, in terms of, what are the most common access issues that you come across when you're working in this role, when you're working with businesses?
Well, as I'm a wheelchair user, the most common one is physical access. They, you know, I keep getting flashbacks to this time when I was living in London, and I walked down a whole street, and it's much easier to spot in London because everything is condensed and it's slightly packed. So you walk down the street of about 20 cafes, and none of them have a ramp, and they all have steps. Um, and that really gets kind of gets quite frustrating. And I think the main thing is just a basic ramp. It doesn't
Yeah.
cost a huge amount of money. Ramps are obviously they're not what I've always been taught, and what I've always said is ramps are not the first port of call. They're not the first and only option.
Yeah.
They should be the last option. There's a whole host of other ways to make things accessible that don't involve ramps, but a ramp is such an easy solution that it can just, if you've got it, you can just whip it out for a disabled person, and they can at least get into your space.
Yeah.
Um, and that tends to be one of the most common things that I see is businesses just not even having a ramp, even for a little tiny step. No ramp. So that's my bugbear, and it's the most common thing.
Mm.
Um, but other things, having very, very tightly packed shops that don't have a huge amount of space,
Mm.
cafes with just a physical menu and no other way to provide that information to someone who is visually impaired. You can have a little recording of the menu. That could be a very easy way that someone could kind of do it that way. And things like that I think are quite simple once you know how to put them in, and once you've spoken to a disabled person, they can sort of give you a bit more guidance. So
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
the main thing for me.
Yeah, definitely. And our team have just put up the link as well for wearepurple.org.uk. So understanding the purple pound market. So that's great.
Yeah, great.
Michael's just said a small cafe near a local hospital to where we lived had not only a ramp but cutouts in the tables for wheelchairs. So Fab really thought about it for
That's
small business.
brilliant. Yeah, oh, I love that. Oh, that's a great. Huh. This is the nicest thing about being an access consultant is you learn about other things that other people are doing. Would never have thought to do a little cutout. That's brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good. And actually, sometimes you see, don't you, that too often in restaurants, people go in and actually chairs and furniture have got to be moved around and everything else. And
Yeah,
it just for that person who that's being made for, it's nice to see that they're making that effort to make that person comfortable. But at the same time, it feels like a bit of an inconvenience. You feel a bit guilty because they're having to do. Whereas if it was all ready before you came,
absolutely. One of the things that really gets to me quite a lot is when I go into a cafe and it's very nice when someone offers to pull out a chair for you, but I'm also like, I went to a garden centre back when we were allowed to go out, and I had to like pull this metal chair across a concrete floor, and it makes this loud noise, and I'm just like, it's one of the things that I really don't like is when I feel like I'm making a big fuss.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of disabled people do feel that as well. They kind of struggle to kind of get what they need, but also don't want to be made to feel like it's an inconvenience.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and I can remember, and I think it works both ways as well because it's understanding and not assuming. I can remember like a few years back when we would take my gran out, and we would take her out in a wheelchair just because of purely of her age and not wanting to or not being able to walk that far. But the one thing she would hate was that people would automatically assume that she wanted to stay in the chair, and it's like instead of saying to her, how would you like to sit? How would you be comfortable? And we'd always say to them, no, actually, she prefers to sit on the chair, and we'll fold the wheelchair up. Thank you. But so it's kind of having that balance and asking, I think, what makes you comfortable? How would you like it?
There's a lot of discussion specifically on Twitter, because I use Twitter quite a lot, about things like able-bodied people taking hold of another person's wheelchair to kind of help them. Things like grabbing hold of someone who's blind and trying to help them. And it's like, I know where I'm going. Just if you'd asked, then I might have been able to say, actually, no, I'm fine. Or yes, please, I would like some help. That's a really big thing.
Yeah.
Having that communication, not just assuming that person needs the help and taking over.
Yeah, definitely. We've had an email in from a customer that said, how do you work with businesses? For example, do you do presentations, workshops, online training? So I think this is probably going to be a 2-question, really. How did it happen prior to pandemic, and how does it happen now? How have you adapted?
Well, my focus is mostly with the heritage sector. I am trying to expand my business to do a lot more with private organizations, so cafes, restaurants, all that kind of stuff. My experience has always been working with museums specifically. It's much harder to work with businesses because they don't really want to pay you to tell them how to do things better. They don't want to, it's a hard line, because I was actually having a conversation with a councillor about this recently, from the local council. It's hard to balance your want for something to change with recognizing that this is valuable information and it's worth me to get paid for that information and paid for that advice. So I think that's something that I'm still working through. It's not simple. But yeah, so I do offer training for my people that I work with. I would like to expand a little bit more. I'm looking at ways to kind of offer a little bit more of a tailored situation, so that I can offer training for people who are not quite sure, for possibly for volunteers for museums. That's my next sort of avenue. But yeah, it's still progressing, still trying to figure out the best way to do it. It's not simple. So
yeah, but no, that's good. That's good.
Really,
and I think actually, I think you stumbled on the answer of what's the value and why should they. And I think it's just putting that into words when you sell it to them, that actually, why should you access my details? Would you like to access a UK market that's 13.9 million people, with a spending power of billions? And if you can break that down locally to that area, I think it kind of makes it more real. But
yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Lorraine is saying, just on the conversation we were having previously, she's just come back and said, I like the idea of talking menus. It could be helpful for people with dyslexia as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. And another thing on the line of dyslexia actually is a lot of people who are neurodiverse, which is the term for people who are autistic, dyslexic, the range of neurodiverse conditions. Black on white, or so like strict black text on white background.
Yeah.
Completely impossible, because it means that the text kind of jumps around. That's another thing that not very many businesses know. So obviously printing things on black and white and that strict contrast, it's just very inaccessible.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. A young person that we've been working with, who does have dyslexia, who is neurodiverse. We've got some of the filters in the office, so we've been able to do that with him recently, and have a look at it and go, is there a particular color? And it's amazing when you play with the colors, the difference that it makes, and the sudden realization that I've got something that's going to help me with that. So yeah, and I think maybe it's not just going to be with menus as well. I think that looking at other options that people can do.
I did an online training accessibility course with Microsoft, and they chose a black and white presentation. And I'm sitting there going, "You're Microsoft. You should know that black and white is completely inaccessible."
Yes. It's sometimes the people that should be most aware are the least aware, unfortunately. Michael is saying that used to go into One Fish and Chip, a cafe that had movable chairs, refurbed and put fixed chairs in, so they couldn't go in again. So again, that's something they obviously didn't consider. Martin's saying, if it saves the business getting fined or sued, then it's got to be worth paying for the compliance information. Absolutely.
Surprised though, there is absolutely no legal teeth to the Equality Act. The funding for taking on legal action against businesses has been completely defunded. So they face basically no consequences except for in the public court. So often taking to Twitter, taking to Facebook, is really the only way that disabled people can make some sort of change and to tell the business they're doing something wrong. So there's no suing. There's really no legal action that can be taken. We did chase this up about, I think it was about 5 years ago, against something specific. And the lawyers that we contacted, I sort of said, can we do what's it called, legal aid? And they said, not unless you have £8,000 up front to cover our costs. So it doesn't, getting sued is not a threat.
Not an option. But I think, like you say, that where the power lies is then in the people power to be able to bring an awareness to that to the greater public, which suddenly makes a business go, oh, actually that's definitely more detrimental to me.
I had this with White Stuff. There was I had a job interview and I wanted to go into a White Stuff, and they had steps to get into the building. It had previously been a bank. I had seen the building before, and they had made no adaptations to it. They had no ramp, and they had a lovely little plaque on the wall that said "Dogs Welcome," but human beings in a wheelchair couldn't get in. And the woman came out and she was like, "I'm really sorry, we don't have a ramp." and I was very mad. And I managed to get all of my friends to contact White Stuff and say, "This is ridiculous. This is a new space that you've just taken over, and you didn't think to put it around." And White Stuff actually, some of their managers came down all the way from London to come and have tea with me to say, "What can we do to resolve this?" Because if you get people involved and you get people saying this is not okay, it's been 10 years now since the Equality Act, it has a lot more sway. So
Brilliant. And actually, funny enough, we're talking about presentations and tools and things, and Martin said that he's just experimenting with a special tool on his websites to make them easier to read and generally use, and actually on SWAD's site at the moment, where he's looking to improve it as they go. So it's good to see there's some advancements there that are happening. That are bringing them in. So when you decided to start your business, just thinking more about you and being self-employed and starting a business now, when you decided to start your business, what challenges or worries did you have, and how did you kind of deal with those?
My biggest worry was trying to start a business whilst on universal credit, and at the time I was also on employment support allowance. And you have a cap on your earnings if you're on universal credit, and it's even lower if you are on ESA, I think. And I was trying to figure out how to start earning money whilst also being on those benefits, and trying to ease myself off of them. And I actually had Samee to come and help me with that. I was sort of saying, what do I do? You know, how do I do this? If I declare self-employed to universal credit, is that going to mean that I have to then suddenly submit I was reading all these things about submitting a 5-year plan and doing all this kind of stuff. And I just that's not something I even know how to do. And Samee came on board and sort of said, yes, we can help. Calm down, it's all fine. And gave me some really good advice, which was, if you're on universal credit, then they'll take into account how much you're earning. And I will say, obviously, a lot of disabled people are not a big fan of universal credit. It has its flaws, but one of the only things I like about it is that it does reflect your earnings, so that if you're earning more one month, then maybe it reduces your benefits. And it's not a case if you're suddenly earning and then you're just kicked off, which is what I was worried about, because I couldn't sustain myself otherwise. That was the main thing that I really struggled with. So,
and I think it is when you've received that support for a certain length of time, it is a worrying time, and it is, people generally want to be able to succeed and move forward and do things and be more independent financially, but it is a worrying time, especially where we've had a history of, all of a sudden after you get to a certain point, everything stops and drops off, so I think, like you say, although despite the flaws that we have with universal credit, in some senses the system is a little bit better, that it works a bit more like that balance and gives you that time to kind of basically steady the income side of things, so you're a bit more secure before they go, okay, you're on your own now, so it's given that balance, and that's the good thing about it, I think. Lorraine was just saying that, she said she doesn't understand how people will be sued by a council's planning permission department for breaches of planning laws, but councils won't sue breaches in disability access laws. And I think that, I think that's a question we definitely all ask ourselves, isn't it? That, it's crazy that they won't look at that, but they'll look at that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I maybe about 5 years ago, I keep saying 5 years ago. Was it 5 years ago? I think it probably was. I went to a local cafe in Blandford, and I sort of said, hey, can you maybe get a ramp? And they said, oh, the council told us we didn't have to worry about it. And I just thought, so the council, I'm not surprised. The council was peddling the information of, well, nobody's going to sue you, so you'll be fine. I think realistically, the main thing that appeals to businesses is having to say, look, this is the money that you want access to, right? So do that, and the council back you up as well. So it's yeah, it's
Yeah,
not.
and I think sometimes rather than looking at the enforcement, like you say, being able to show the positive sides of it and actually the potential
Yeah.
and what you're missing out on, without the
Mm.
threat of fines and stuff, what you're missing out on is far more impactful, definitely far
Yeah,
more impactful.
and also the council has a huge problem with underemploying disabled people. So you've
Mm,
got people possibly in these roles that don't really understand the impact. You've got people in planning who don't understand the actual impact of being
mm,
inaccessible to disabled people.
yeah, yeah. We've had another email in from someone that said, "What are your next steps to develop the business?" So, what are your thoughts and plans around how you're going to develop and grow?
I would like a website. I've been thinking for a while that I need a website, and the idea of it kind of scares me. Next, I would like to look at maybe some kind of workshop, online workshop.
Mm,
I've also been working with quite a few local museums and partnerships in looking at maybe creating an apprenticeship where disabled people who want to get into museum work but are quite hesitant because museum work is very inaccessible
yeah,
because it's usually dealing with historic buildings and
yeah,
people it costs a lot of money to adapt a historical building. And getting them involved in every level of access, every level of museum work. So that's getting disabled people who want to learn about museums into
mm,
trustee, trustee
yeah,
meeting,
yeah,
collections management, a visitor experience, giving them a taster in all those different levels of
mm,
museum work. I'd really like to apply for funding to do that.
yeah,
Um, maybe that's probably where I'd like to go to next. To try and figure out the best way to do that.
mm,
I'd obviously like to build up a little bit of reserve
yeah,
financially so that I can, expand a bit more and I can pay for an accountant and I can do stuff like that that I would really need help with. That's, I think, probably my next one. And yeah, workshops. I'd like to do more training and figure out how
yeah.
best to do that online.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and I think sometimes it's quite interesting because businesses will or not all businesses, so it's probably unfair to generally categorize, but one of the most common excuses for not doing these adaptations is it costs, and
yeah,
it's expensive, and there are certain conditions. Instead of going, actually, we want to be able to do this. How can we do it?
yeah,
Maybe it's not the question about not the question of what are the problems, but what is the solution? What's our options?
yeah,
And different. And I think sometimes just thinking a little bit differently starts to bring up the
yeah,
solutions, and that's where someone like yourself can actually come in and help with that. Definitely,
yeah.
um,
I
Michael.
tend to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry, go on.
I did just want to say, I recently learned that the Tower of London just put in a changing place. So, it's one of the oldest buildings, and we know it's one of the oldest buildings in the country. So you kind of think, actually, there are ways to do it. You just need
Yeah,
to do it and get it done. It needs to happen. So that's what excites
exactly.
me.
Exactly. Yeah, and if they can do it, then I think pretty much anyone can
London
find
can put in a
find
huge
a way.
changing place. That's huge. Like that's
Yeah,
really important. Yeah.
yeah, definitely, definitely. Michael's echoing the thing about the DWP. They do make it quite hard, and don't really help. I think they're getting better. I think they've got a long way to go, and I think things are starting to make a difference. And I know,
I think maybe
um,
before the pandemic, but yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I know there are certainly things that are happening. Sam, our CEO, is doing a lot of work at government-based level around disability as well, and there's white papers and green papers and all the other papers they have being created. But there's some real work going on to try and bring this to the forefront and help.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
think Scope are as well. Scope are doing quite a lot too.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Martin has shared as well. This is now being launched globally for online compliance. So it's
Ooh,
www.ada.gov. So that's a link for us. And Liz started to share a comment. Her brother has. I think we'll just wait for that to come
oh,
through. But thank you, Liz. Good to see you as well. So
that's the Americans with Disabilities Act, which I think we had a version of, which was the Disability Discrimination Act, which was replaced by the Equality Act, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Brilliant. And we've shared a link as well, government link about organisations, Department for Work and Pensions as well. So that's on there if people want to find out a bit more information. So just having a look, kind of, we've talked about bits and pieces, but how do you feel that working for yourself is better for you? What are the benefits of you working for yourself now you've taken that plunge?
I think it gives me the opportunity to really focus my attention on what I really want to be doing. I did do a lot of work with the National Trust, and I love working for the National Trust. That was really, I had a great time doing, it was a part-time job, but it wasn't in disability. I wasn't working for disabled access. And really, that's kind of frustrating when you're doing another job and people come to you and say, "What do you think about us doing this?" And I'm like, I mean, would you like to pay me to tell you what to do?
Yeah.
It's quite frustrating. People wanting to pick your brain and saying, the amount of times I've had to say, "I'm sorry, but someone picking my brain doesn't pay my rent." I think that's really, going fully self-employed has really given me the opportunity to focus and figure out how to really make the biggest impact with organizations and not just do other things and then dip my toe into access when people inevitably come to me and say, "Hey, now that we've got you here, what do we do about this?" It's much harder to do that, I think.
Yeah. But I think sometimes as well, it's just having the confidence to, be right. And maybe you give those couple of top tips that say, okay, well, these are your main areas you need to focus on. But if you'd like me to go into more detail on that, then I'm happy to sit down and we can discuss the costs surrounding that. And sometimes that's your polite way of being able to say, I'll give you the information, but it's not free. I've got to earn a living as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it does help to sort of say, you're asking me to give you free advice on 13.9 million people with 232 billion pound spending power. So this money is financially very valuable to you. So
yeah, absolutely. So what support have you, and I know you've mentioned already a little bit about us, but what support have you had to get going, and how did this help with ourselves and with other organizations that may have been there to offer that support?
Well, I was very lucky at the beginning of my career to become a trustee with the Shire Hall project in Dorchester. And through that, they had a training budget for their trustees. And I was able to do a training course with the Centre for Accessible Environments, which basically gave me the very fundamental grounding of this is how you do an access audit. And that's something that really, really helped. I think the biggest thing that really helps is it's unfortunately just networking, just trying to network and figure out who knows who, which is awful. I hate the lot is networking. I'm okay at networking, but it shouldn't just be a case of who knows who. I think if you can get some support from an organization that you're already working with that can kind of say, well, actually, we can do the Disability Rights UK training. There's Disability Rights UK, Scope offer their own training. There are plenty of training programs out there that can be quite helpful. And obviously, Samee gave me the advice on how best to kind of ease myself off of universal credit and how that was actually going to work in practice, which was really important. And I've also received quite a lot of support from the Arts Development Company in Dorchester, who Dorchester's the county seat, so it's everything happening. Who really are very focused on mentoring and trying to make sure that they're getting disabled people, young disabled creatives off the ground, and getting them the experience that they need. So I've been very lucky to have the wealth of support that I have, and also from my family and friends. Can't say that they didn't do anything. They've all been incredibly helpful.
Good, good. And Lorraine is saying that she likes that phrasing, Ricky. So yeah, I think it's just sometimes, being a bit tongue in cheek helps with people and businesses. And one of my favorite sayings, when people say, "Are you free?" I always say, "No, I'm very expensive, but how can I help?" It's always a bit of a tongue in cheek thing
Yeah.
of saying, but I think, just having that little thing, the confidence just to go, here's a couple of areas, but actually, let's talk about what your budget is and how I can help you and what the costs are. We've also put up the link to the arts development company.org.uk, so that's up there if anyone else wants to find out, and just to obviously again open the floor. We've had some comments and stuff coming through, but if you've got any questions, if people are getting value, then just put it in the comments below. Let us know what your biggest takeaways are from so far today, and you can comment via email or via the Facebook page. But that's brilliant. There's some great stuff coming through. I think, I would say to you that I am going to pick your brains now. This is the one that we're going to pick your brains for free on this one. But just what would be your top 3 tips that you could offer a business when it comes to thinking about access?
I think the biggest thing is not underestimating the value of disabled people and our families and our friends. Not saying, well, it's, we get maybe one disabled person every block. Like, no, just do it now. Do it now before, preemptively, before you get a disabled person come through the door who's really angry and has lots and lots of friends. The amount of times I've had to try to not be angry I think that's one. I had thought of one, but now it's just disappeared from my head. Talk to disabled people. Biggest thing, talk to disabled people. There are organizations out there that you can talk to. There are probably people that you know that you can talk to learn a bit more about what access means and how to improve your access. I think that's one of the biggest things, is making sure that you actually communicate with disabled people, and not to just sort of say, well, I think if I just put in a ramp, it'll be fine. Like, you could see it as an opportunity. Well, that would be my third piece. See it as an opportunity. Advice is see it as an opportunity to expand your engagement. That's really what it is. You're expanding your engagement with 13.9 million disabled people. So it's not the case of, I'll just tick this box and then it'll be fine. Like, no, you're actually engaging with a huge community with money.
And I think tip number 4 is go and talk to Chloe, because she holds the key that accesses the £232 billion market. So that's the one as well. Have a chat with Chloe and she'll talk to you.
The first time I said that to someone, they were like, mic drop. Like, that's all you need to say. Like, when you're trying to convince people to be more accessible, like, that's one of the biggest things. So that's always what I start off with, is like,
and actually the ones that have, you said about just the 1 or 2 disabled people a year, is it really worth it? Maybe that's the reason that you're only getting 1 or 2 disabled people, is because you've not dealt with the access side of things. So it might
about 8 people out of, I think the statistic was 8 people out of 10. Was it? I need to double check this. 8 people out of 10 will leave and will never tell you that you've done something, or that they can't get in. They'll never complain. But there is bound to be 1 or 2 people who will be very vocal. But for those 1 or 2 people, there's also a large amount of people that haven't complained, and you just didn't know that they were there. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I think the comments are already starting to come in anyway. Lorraine has said, go Chloe, it's been really interesting listening to you. So they are already starting to come in. But as we start to close, add value, let us know that you've how you've enjoyed it. We're just going to finish things off now. Any final thoughts from you, Chloe, around this and the conversation today?
I guess my main thing is, if you're able-bodied and you're thinking, this is new stuff, talk to disabled people. Maybe notice your local cafe. Oh, my local cafe doesn't have a ramp. Maybe I could ask them if they have a ramp. it's not. It shouldn't just be up to disabled people to make those changes. Everyone can do that. Everyone can ask the questions. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay, excellent. We're going to finish off now, and I've got a couple of things to talk to you about after we end the live session. But it has been amazing. Thank you all, everyone, for joining us. Like I said, we've got a competition that we're going to release next week about sharing and growing the audience. So if you want to be in potential for winning our fantastic prize, you need to be looking at our social media to see what the challenge is and how we're going to grow this. It's been great to see you. Martin is saying, let's just see some of the comments we've got. Martin is saying, thanks, Chloe, you're an inspiration.
I think Martin is the one who I'm going to be speaking to. So.
Martin is the one we're going to have a chat with. Asher has said, great statistics, Chloe, very informative and practical advice given articulately. So that's brilliant. Lorraine is saying, thank you, guys. See you next week. So it's been brilliant. So it is a thank you for me. We will be on the same time next week. Exciting episode at 12 o'clock. And I'll let you know details next week about that. It's a goodbye and a thank you from me and from Chloe, I'm sure.
Bye.
And we will see you next week. Take care. Have great weekends. Have great weeks. See you next week.
Bye.